Right now, at this very moment, the governor of New York is erupting as Target abandons East Harlem after a New York crime surge. Here's the detail that changes everything about this story. The Target that just closed was not just any store. It was the first Target ever built on the island of Manhattan. It took a 13-year effort to get it there. The site was a derelict factory on the East River. The development cost was the largest single investment in Target's entire corporate history at the time of opening. More than half of the 400 people hired to work there lived in the neighborhood. Co-ops in East Harlem listed the Target specifically in their apartment marketing materials. Local residents petitioned to keep it. In October 2023, the doors closed. Not because Target was struggling nationally, because New York made it impossible to stay. Sit with that. Here is what should bother every New Yorker. The crime that drove Target out did not appear overnight. It built slowly, year by year, while the people who run this city had plenty of time to address it and did not. And now, a community that waited 13 years to get that store is left without it because someone else decided their safety was not a priority worth protecting. To understand why this closure lands differently from every other retail departure story, you need to understand what getting that store to East Harlem actually required. The East River Plaza site at 117th Street had been a derelict wire factory since 1976. It sat empty for over 2 decades while developers tried to figure out what to do with it. 13 years of zoning battles, planning approvals, and construction later, Target opened its first Manhattan store on July 25, 2010. Target's executive vice president of property development stood at that opening and said it was the largest single investment on any single project in the company's history. Think about what that meant. Not a flagship in Times Square, not a prestige location on Fifth Avenue. The largest single investment in Target's history went to East Harlem. The area had unemployment as high as 20%. Almost 27% of households were below the poverty line, a neighborhood that had been waiting for affordable retail for decades. And Target chose it first. The store hired more than 400 people, more than half of them lived in the neighborhood. It brought fresh food to an area with almost none. Apartment co-ops started listing Target as a selling point. Property values around the plaza went up. Local resident Alex Abreu said he knew exactly how the neighborhood changed after Target arrived. He said he used Target in marketing when apartments were sold. One of the biggest attractions was having a Target nearby. Here is what that actually meant to East Harlem. For the first time in a generation, residents in one of Manhattan's most underserved communities could buy groceries, household essentials, and affordable clothing without traveling across the borough. That is what was built, and that is what was lost. Here is exactly what happened in the months before the closure. And here is the detail that makes Target's explanation both true and incomplete at the same time. CEO Brian Cornell had been raising alarms for over a year. On an earnings call in May 2023, he told analysts that organized retail crime had escalated to a level the company had never seen. Shrinkage, the industry term for inventory lost to theft, was projected to cost Target more than $500 million in that year alone, on top of $700 million to $800 million in theft-related losses the year before. In August 2023, he added another number. Violent incidents at Target stores had increased 120% in the first 5 months of the year, compared to the same period 12 months earlier. When asked in May 2023 whether Target planned to close stores, Cornell said this: "We do not want to close stores. We know how important our stores are. They create local jobs, they generate taxes. They are very important for those local shoppers, and they play a critical role in communities across the country." 4 months later, he closed 9 of them, including the first Target ever built in Manhattan. This was not reluctance. This was a company that ran out of alternatives. This was not a business strategy disguised as a safety concern. This was $500 million in annual losses, plus 120% more violent incidents, plus a workforce being put in danger every shift. The CEO said he did not want to close. He closed anyway. That is the difference between a choice and a conclusion. Now here is where Governor Hochul enters the picture. And this is where the story becomes more than a retail closure. Hochul is not just the governor of New York. She is the person constitutionally responsible for public safety in this state. She is the person who has spent years positioning herself as the national face of progressive governance. The argument that you can run a high-tax, high-service state and still retain the businesses and communities that depend on it. That is who she is. That is what is at stake for her personally. And when Target closed the first Manhattan store it ever built, citing a 120% increase in violent incidents and $500 million in losses from theft, here is what Governor Hochul said. She said, "This is a problem we are not blind to. We are very much aware of what this does to the community. We are focused on money to the localities to help them beef up their security. Money to the localities to help them beef up their security." That was the official response to the departure of a store that took 13 years to build and served an area with almost no other affordable retail options. No new enforcement framework. No accountability for the organized retail crime networks operating in the city. No policy answer to the 120% increase in violent incidents that Cornell had been describing publicly for months. Money to the localities, a press statement, and then the doors closed. Here is the sentence that should be burning in Albany right now. The store took 13 years to open. It closed in 13 years. The crime that drove it out was known, documented, and described publicly by the CEO for months before the decision was made. The governor had the information. The response was not equal to the problem. And here's what this closure looks like from street level, not from an earnings call, not from an Albany press conference. An East Harlem resident named Cookie told a local news camera, "I am so angry. I buy everything there. We need it." An elderly woman named Maria Rodriguez said the Walmart is closed too. "We do not have a lot of stores like this here." Older residents who depended on the Target for essentials, including affordable groceries, household basics, and medicines, now have to travel significantly further to find comparable prices. Lou Martins, who had lived in East Harlem for years, said he was especially worried about the domino effect. He had already watched drugstores close because of shoplifting. He asked, "What if other stores leave? I can feel it. People here are worried about crime getting worse. As a community, we cannot allow this to continue. That domino effect is not a fear, it is a pattern." Walgreens has been closing urban locations for the same reasons for years. CVS has followed. The East Harlem Community Board Chair Xavier Santiago noted that Target made this announcement during Hispanic Heritage Month. To a predominantly Hispanic community, he said the optics were poor. That is one way to describe closing Manhattan's first Target in a low-income minority neighborhood, while citing crime data that an independent investigation would later challenge. Because here's the part of this story that nobody in government wants to engage with. The people who depended on that store most had nothing to do with the conditions that drove it out. They signed a petition. They told reporters they were furious. They asked the store to stay, and the store left anyway. The policy environment that allowed the crime to compound was not their fault and not their decision, but they are the ones who live with the consequences. If you are still watching, you already understand what the political response to this story is missing. Subscribe to America Reports right now. Share this with anyone who thinks retail closures are a Wall Street story, because Cookie in East Harlem and the elderly residents who now travel further for groceries say otherwise, and tell us in the comments. Target took 13 years to open Manhattan's first store in East Harlem, and 13 years later, crime drove it out. Who is responsible for that, and what would it actually take to fix it? Drop your answer below because I genuinely want to know what you think. Now here is the part of this story that honest coverage has to include. The full picture is more complicated than the corporate statement. In December 2023, CNBC published an investigation that found something that complicated Target's specific framing. In several cases, the crime rates at nearby Target locations that remained open were actually higher than at the stores that were closed. In some Seattle locations, the closed stores had 30 to 33% fewer reported larcenies than stores Target kept open in the same city. In East Harlem specifically, the store recorded 844 incidents between 2021 and late 2023. But a Greenwich Street store in Lower Manhattan that Target kept open recorded more than 2,090 reported incidents in the same period. That finding raised a legitimate question. Was theft the complete explanation? Or were underperforming stores being closed for business reasons that the theft narrative provided useful cover? Cornell and Target pushed back. The company maintained that each closure reflected specific safety and operational conditions at that location. Still, the question is legitimate, and the honest version of the story has to name it. What is not disputed is the impact on the community. Whatever Target's full reasoning, the result for East Harlem was the same. The first Manhattan Target, 13 years of community investment, gone. The food desert expanded, elderly residents must travel farther. The domino effect on neighboring businesses is real. The corporate explanation may be incomplete. The community's loss is not. Here is what happened to Target in the years after it closed the East Harlem store, because the story did not end in October 2023. In January 2025, Target eliminated its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, aligning with the political direction of the new federal administration. The backlash was immediate and sustained. A boycott took hold across social media, and it showed up in the numbers. Comparable store sales fell 3.8% in the first quarter of 2025. Overall, revenue dropped from $24.5 billion to $23.8 billion. Foot traffic declined for 8 consecutive weeks. The stock lost more than a third of its value, wiping out over $20 billion in shareholder worth. Chief Executive Officer Brian Cornell, who had said he did not want to close stores, announced he would step down in August 2025. Tariffs compounded the damage. The company that had cited crime as an unsustainable burden was now navigating an unsustainable cost structure from import duties, a boycott it had triggered through its own decisions, and a collapse in consumer confidence that had nothing to do with New York. The company that left East Harlem, citing conditions it said it could not control, spent the following 2 years creating conditions it could have avoided. That is not a political observation. It is a business observation. And it matters because it shows that the crime that drove Target out of East Harlem was not Target's only problem. It was the first domino. The company's own decisions knocked over the rest. On July 25, 2010, Target opened the doors at East River Plaza in East Harlem. It took 13 years to build. It was the largest single investment in the company's history. More than half of the 400 people they hired lived in the neighborhood. It was the first Target ever built in Manhattan, and it opened in one of the most underserved communities in New York City. On October 21, 2023, those same doors closed. Violent incidents were up 120%, $500 million in projected losses. A petition from local residents asked it to stay, and a governor who had nothing to offer except money for localities to beef up their security. The factory site took 13 years to become East Harlem's Target. The doors stayed open for 13 years. And when crime made it impossible to stay, the community that had nothing to do with that crime is the one that lost the store. Where a company chooses to open is a promise. Where it chooses to close is a verdict. And right now, New York is collecting verdicts.